Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about money. I want to talk about your money and my money and all the taxes we pay and what actually happens to them. And I want to talk a bit about the extent to which the government seems to squander absolutely billions and billions and billions, and how a lot of this money seems to end up in the hands of supporters of the Tory party and donors and so on. But before I do that, if you haven't already subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you would do so. And if you know of anybody you think might be interested in what I have to say, and you wouldn't mind passing on my details, I'd be very, very grateful. Thank you. So if you listen to Sunak, everything's fantastic. We're doing so well. I mean, under his stewardship, fastest growing this, fastest growing that, and won the World Cup in 1966. I mean, everything is absolutely wonderful. But the reality, as we all know, is that things are pretty dire. The economy is stagnant. We know that more businesses are in trouble than have ever been since 2009, which was just after the financial crisis. There's virtually no inward investment, because who's going to come and invest in the UK if you're inside a barrier of red tape if you want to start exporting to the EU? Public services are in chaos. Look at the National Health Service, 8 million on the waiting list, and the schools falling down, and etc., etc., etc. Everywhere more money is needed. And yet at the same time, we're paying the highest taxes we've paid for 70 years. And we've got 3.8 million people living in destitution. That's according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And that includes millions of children. And generally speaking, things are pretty dire, and I think we all know that they're going to get worse. Now, if you've been watching the COVID inquiry this week, you'll have seen that during Johnson's premiership, things were pretty chaotic, and everything was a complete and utter mess. And I think that probably goes a certain way to explaining just how badly money has been wasted and squandered. And I just wanted to go through and list some of the more outstanding cases of where money has been thrown away. And just give you one or two updates where I can. Now, the biggest and most egregious waste of money was the test and trace. This is where Dido Harding, a woman without a particularly spectacular track record, was given a budget of £37,000 million to set up and run a test and trace sort of whatever. And she succeeded in spending £29.3 billion. That's, I think it works out at £437 for every man, woman and child in the country. And it was a failure. It didn't work, and the National Audit Office had a look at it, and they said it was a complete waste of money. It didn't achieve anything at all, and they also said that they were unable to complete a proper audit because the organisers of test and trace were unable to provide enough evidence. In other words, they didn't keep proper records, and it seems this is all sort of died. It's all sort of fizzled away. 29.3 billion went somewhere we don't know where. It's just gone, and it's time to move on. Now, a lot of this money for this test and trace was spent on consultants. Consultants like gluten intolerance and dyslexia, things that have only sort of suddenly come about in recent years. But consultants seem to be employed for all sorts of different things to do with the government. In this case, with test and trace, at one time, I think Harding herself admitted that they were employing 10,000 consultants at a minimum of £1,000 a day. That's a pay rate of £250,000 a year. 1,000 people on salaries equivalent to £250,000 a year. A lot of them on a lot more than that, of course. But this is all to consult about test and trace. Now, test and trace is not a particularly complicated operation. One wouldn't have thought. It may be involve a lot of people, a lot of organisation and so on, but it's not something that you would have thought you need consultants. And the other thing is, all these consultants came from the big accountancy companies. And so you have to ask, why would you need 1,000 consultants from an accountancy company or accountancy firms to consult on something like test and trace, it absolutely stinks of just throwing money away. But nobody seems to want to investigate why this ever happened. And the other thing about these, whilst I'm talking about consultants, as far as HS2 was concerned, HS2, as we all know, is a railway. So if you're going to build a railway, well, you need designers, and you need planners, and you need surveyors, and you need all the construction people, the earth movers and the track layers and the tunnel borers and the bridge builders and all the rest of it. You need specialists to build a railway. But for some reason or other, £280 million was spent on consultants from the accountancy firms. PwC got 102 million, Deloitte's got 86 million, Ernst & Young got 25 million, KPMG, they got 9 million. Possibly KPMG only got 9 million because they'd previously been fined 14.4 million for giving false documents to the regulator looking into Carillion when that collapsed. And I mean, when we're told that it costs 10 times as much to build HS2, a high-speed rail in this country as it does in France, I mean, maybe this has something to do with it. Maybe this constant use of consultants everywhere. I mean, what do people working for an accountancy firm know anything about test and trace or railways or anything else for that matter? And I think the reason they're employed is because civil servants, if they make a decision and it goes wrong, they're in trouble. But if they hire a consultant to say, is this okay? The consultant just says, yes, that's okay, not knowing the first thing about it. Then when it goes wrong, they say, oh, we checked it with the consultants. The consultant said it was okay, so it's fine. And I think this is this use of consultants is adding so much money. I mean, again, going back to test and trace, 29.3 billion. I don't know what proportion of that was spent on consultants, but obviously a significant proportion. It's complete and utter throwing money away and incompetence. And it's our money. It's your money. It's my money. It's taxpayers' money. Now, 30 billion was lost because of Truss and Kwarteng's budget, the mini budget. That's a calculation according to the Independent Resolution Foundation. Just stupid, utter incompetence. But she's bouncing about as though she's the Queen of Sheba right now. I mean, she's back, advising the government. She's going to bring out her own mini budget, isn't she? Before Jeremy Hunt brings out his. According to the National Audit Office, under Sunak as Chancellor, there was £21 billion worth of fraud. I mean, this is staggering. I mean, everyone looks at Sunak and they all say, oh, he's very competent, he's very, very good manager, very good, oh, yes, he's very good organiser and all the rest of it. The guy's hopeless. 21 billion in fraud. And also, of course, his famous eat out to help the virus out. 7 billion of that fraud was bounce back loans, whereby you had to go on the website. I've mentioned this several times before. You go on the website, you just put in the name of a company. You'd register a company, put a name in, and just say you want 50,000. They give you 50,000. It's straight to your bank. All you needed was the name of a company and a bank account. Many people realised this was a great way to get 50 grand for nothing. Actually, it was a story of some people who were caught, I think, at the airport with £15,000 in cash in a suitcase, and they were asked what was it for, and they said, oh, they're going to Spain because they got a house there and they were going to put an extension on or something or other. And they were asked where to get the money from, and they said, oh, it's a bounce back loan. 4 billion was unusable PPE. This is PPE which was overpriced, wrong specs, it was out of date, or it was unusable. All these contracts given without tender. All many times with people who just knew Tories, and all the firms that were experts that knew all about it. No, they weren't used. 2.1 billion was what it cost to prepare for a no deal, because at one time it looked as though there was going to be a no deal, and this involved all sorts of arrangements for how we would cope with a no deal. 2.3 billion was spent, and it was a fine. This was a fine which the EU levied, and we went to court and so on, and eventually we're going to have to pay it. This was for allowing Chinese people to import goods with false values. In other words, it's something that goes on now. I mean, I know it's happening now. I know people are actually doing it. You go to China, you buy some goods, and then the goods cost so much, and you make out your own invoice for a much lower amount. So when the goods arrive in the UK, you pay less VAT and less duty on import, and then you can just sell the stuff and you're away. This is very, very common. It's going on a lot. Anyway, we were fined 2.3 billion for allowing this to happen. 100 billion is the loss of business with the EU. 4 to 6% drop in our business with the EU since Brexit. 1.6 billion was spent on these barges to house the asylum seekers, like the BB Stockholm. Apparently, there are going to be 3 of them. 1.6 billion. The one that's down there at the moment, it's moored. It's moored alongside a sort of jetty. Jetty belongs to a family called the Langham family. They're big contributors to UKIP, apparently, big donors to UKIP, and they're charging for that boat to be sat there every 24 hours. They're charging £4,000. That's 1.5 million a year for that boat to be stood alongside that jetty. Another firm called Brockwell Group, owned by a guy called Peter Klimt. He had some land, and we bought this land apparently in order to build a new immigration detention centre. We paid £15 million for it. Mr. Klimt, he bought that land just over a year ago for £6 million. In other words, we paid £9 million over the value to get the land because we don't know what to do, because it's only taxpayers' money. It's your money, my money. It doesn't really matter. Whatever they ask, just give them to. The land for HS2, 2,900 acres. The land from Birmingham to Manchester. They're selling that off as quickly as they can. Got to get rid of it quickly, so nobody else can ever reinstate HS2. Spent £205 million on it. I reckon they're going to sell it for about 100 billion. That's another 100 billion gone. £34 million was spent on decorating the offices of the Secretary of State for Education, which is nice. Yeah, office refurbishments. Schools falling down all over the country. Schools in danger of falling down, but 34 million for decoration. Nightingale Hospital beds. We bought 6,000 of them. Cost £2,700 each. That's 16.2 million we spent on those beds. Of course, now the Nightingale Hospitals, we don't need them, but also got rid of the beds, sold them all. Cost £2,700 each. Sold them for £68 each. They brought in 408,000. That's a loss of £15,792,000. It doesn't matter. It's your money and my money. It doesn't matter. Do you think in the whole of the UK you could have found somebody somewhere who could have managed to negotiate a better deal than £68 for a £2,700 bed that has never been used? 2.9 million was paid to special advisors when they were laid off. It was after Brexit. £2 million odd was given to various companies which the Prime Minister's wife was associated with. Firms that subsequently went bust or whatever. In one case, I think one owned nearly $500,000 in tax. Private jets. Sunak loves to go around in that very, very, very expensive helicopter. Well, Truss, when she was Foreign Secretary, she spent £1.8 million on flying around in a plane which would seat up to 350 people, containing her and one or two advisors, presumably. 1.8 billion. And then on top of everything else, adding insult to injury, we paid £245,000 for Boris Johnson's legal fees. Now, looking at that list, and bearing in mind the evidence given at the COVID inquiry this week, the evidence given showing what a chaotic state Number 10 was in, and how government was chaotic. You could understand that it's spending of money is just as chaotic, just as undisciplined, and just as absolutely hopeless. And I think you have instance after instance here of just civil servants spending money, whatever they ask, just give it to them. Just spending money without any proper controls or attempts to get value for money. I mean, it's absolutely shameful. And as I say, we're all suffering right now, and this is our money. I mean, this list I've just given you comes to slightly 150 billion. I mean, that'd go a long way right now. And then you look at the some of the members of Parliament. Rees-Mogg, he was for 7 weeks he was business secretary, absolute disaster. But he was business secretary for 7 weeks. And then he was sacked. What did he get? £16,800 in severance pay for 7 weeks as business secretary. Look at it as just one example. We all know all these MPs have all got God knows how many other jobs. Look at Brandon Lewis. As an MP, he gets 86,584. Incidentally, he was a Northern Ireland minister at the time when he got up in the Commons and said that we were going to break international treaty we had, contract we had with the EU. We were going to break it in a limited and specific way or whatever. Anyway, he gets £86,584 as an MP. He's got a job with a firm called Thakenham Homes. They pay him £60,000 a year on the side. He's got another job with a firm called FM Conway. They give him £60,000 a year on the side as well. He's got another job with a firm called Civitas Investment Management. They give him £30,000 a year. And then he's a director of some school whereby he gets a free car. I mean, it's a job to know how he fits in the time being Prime Minister, being a Member of Parliament. And there are many, many, many more like that. And then you get others who are up to all sorts of questionable activities. Bim Afellami. He's being investigated for being the chair of a pressure group which was lobbying Sunak. Scott Benton, the MP from Blackpool, who recently had the whip withdrawn. He's in trouble because he fell foul of a sting whereby he agreed to for £4,000 a month to lobby ministers on behalf of this fictitious organisation. It's just rotten from top to bottom, and this is, it all goes back, as we all know, it goes back to Johnson, where if you don't have any discipline, don't have any order, you don't have any proper procedures, or when you can just do anything because it's all a bit of a laugh and it doesn't really matter and nobody's going to get punished, you get this sort of mess. You get this list that I've just read out. You get all these MPs who are up to no good because they know they can get away with it. And then you look at HMRC. They're renting offices up in Newcastle, owned by a firm which is ultimately owned in a tax haven. Belongs to two very, very rich property developers. So they're actually renting offices from somebody who's operating for a tax haven in order to avoid UK tax. That's HMRC. And I know from, I happen to know people who are involved in money laundering and tax evasion and have been doing so for years and years and years. HMRC don't want to know about it. So there's so much corruption, there's so much dishonesty, there's so much slack, inefficiency and incompetence in government. And as I said before, it's our money, it's your money, it's my money, it's our taxes. And everything is being squeezed whilst these relatively small number of people are getting rich, one dodge or another. If people are in business and they're very successful, they make lots and lots and lots of money, well, that's one thing. It's a question then, to what extent do you tax them? But when people are just getting away with dodges, with just taking advantage of situations, and when people are just being slack and inefficient and incompetent because they don't think it really matters because it's public money, it's really bad. Something has to be done about all this. It's a complete and utter mess at the moment. But anyway, that's what I think about it. If you've watched this far, thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, if you haven't already done so, or if you know anybody who might be interested, you wouldn't mind passing my details, I'd be very grateful. And so, thanks again, and until next week. Bye for now.